So Vicky Williams, I've been at Rubrik actually a very short period of time. And I am very, very mindful there's a lot of tenured, experienced people in this room who've been doing your roles for a very long time. So one of the things I'm very conscious of, coming from the vendor and from a product and a technology, is to not preach to the converted, right? You guys know what your risks are within your organizations and kind of what's important to deliver your customer experiences and your customer journeys. What I am going to try and talk to today is how I'm engaged with some of the organizations I work with, some of the challenges that they're seeing from a cyber resilience perspective. And then I'd love to sort of get some of your feedback, some of your questions as part of that. So I hope you'll join me in this session, and it won't just be my voice, because that might get a little bit boring for you all, although we're not quite at lunch, so we've got a bit longer. So recovery to resilience, I think how I'd like to start this is my why I joined Rubrik in the first place. I've been in technology sales for over 12 years, and I've never really sold the same thing. And obviously the landscape, actually the beginning of my career was armed forces, and I was an intelligence analyst, so security had a very different concept for me when I began my career. But I was looking around and trying to find an area that was obviously a hot topic. I needed a product that had a great market fit, where people challenged and having issues in this space, and then were people going to want to have a conversation. My hardest job is to try and find people like yourselves who want to speak to me about the things that we do. So Rubrik, when I met with the founders fundamentally 12 years ago, they sat down and looked at backup as a capability, which was sort of in the DR space, disaster recovery, and went, how can we make this cool and sexy? Like, what does the next thing for backup look like? And Bipple and Nitro sort of took the sort of ever-evolving cyber landscape and the threat sort of landscape and converged that with backup. And Rubrik was kind of born. I think now as well, the whole concept of backup has evolved and changed. So we have moved from, although DR is still important and still relevant because data centers could still go down and we still need to kind of consider that. As I said, the threat landscape has changed and it's ever evolving and it's increasing in pace. Every single day, unfortunately, we turn on our TVs or our radios and we hear yet another one of our colleagues and peers and companies have been hit by some form of attack. So it's just constantly evolving and it's moving at rapid pace. I will give you some statistics. I think obviously most of the people in this room are very, very aware of the cost of that to your organizations and what that is actually meaning, but not actually the cost of actually being within an event and kind of what happens to your organization, but the cost of all the tools and all the things that you're having to look at and consider to protect your organizations. One of the biggest conversations I have with organizations around tech sprawl, complexity of organizations, the silos of technology that you have within infrastructure and security. You have requirements coming from technology resilience and op-res teams. A lot of that is kind of like, how do we manage all that? How do we deal with all that? When regulators and people like that are breathing down our necks because we need to evidence and prove that we can recover our critical services. So I think, we all know the landscape. We all understand the landscape. And I think a lot of people, especially, and I was just speaking to a gentleman from the sort of CISO organization, it's around that prevention. So we've got lots of tools that are constantly threat hunting, looking for people in our environments that are doing the bad things. And that's great. But however, Rubrik sort of look at this in a different way. We assume you've been breached. We look at it that we are backing up your most critical data of your most critical services, and we're going to assume that you've been breached. So we're going to then give you the ability to identify a potential threat, a potential anomaly that's happening in your backup to enable you to really get in and hone in on that threat and be able to kind of isolate it, potentially quarantine it, and remove it. Okay, so that's like the real fundamental difference here. In security, you have lots of tooling, lots of things looking for threats, and hopefully that will all be working and be protecting you. If it's not, all good, Rubrik, we're assuming breach. We're going to deal with the problem. Okay, the escalation of threats and the attacker sophistication. I mean, as I've already kind of said to you guys, pretty new to this game. And every time I turn on my TV or Bloomberg or Sky News or whatever it is, it's just yet another type of attack, another team that's spun up, people who are just like fundamentally just ahead of us, faster than us, constantly doing it, and the ripple effect of those impacts that we're seeing. I guess hands up in this room, has anybody actually been in a cyber incident or a cyber event within their organization? Wow. Okay, and I'd love, can maybe some people shout out some like words of what that felt like? Like how did that make you feel when you were in that, in your organization? Knackered. Panic, yep. Any other descriptions of what that feels like? Stress, yeah. And I guess maybe another show of hands would be how, if you put your hand up, if you feel that your organization is really, truly, fully prepared for a complex cyber incident. Okay, fantastic. Yeah, we've got some hands up, which is always good. Are you Rubrik customers? Okay, so this is a little bit around the operational and sort of the regulatory mandates. Again, close to my heart, this one, because I do work with particularly banking and financial services. And we're seeing that landscape really evolve and the pressure really mount. That whole point around, asking you, do you believe that you could recover within a cyber event? Or actually now you need to show me. You need to test. You need to be able to come back to me and end-to-end show me how you've brought back your most critical, important business services. I mean, the pressure is really mounting. I speak to quite a few people within the technology resilience and the OPRES, people who have the sort of the regulatory requirement, who then probably hand that over to the IT functions and then engage with the CISO organization. So we're definitely feeling the heat there. The tech debt iceberg, already touched on it right at the beginning, right? You've probably got plethora of tools and technologies that are all being pieced together, hopefully by some really good processes and really strong people. Unfortunately, there's vendors like us going, you need more tools, you need more things. And by the way, we've all got a really shiny AI thing as well that we'd love you to see and leverage, right? So conscious, we're all aware of that. We're kind of adding to the complexity. And then cyber skills shortage. This one surprised me, actually. And this is from my side of the house. It's really hard to find people who have a really rounded experience of cyber, covering and encompassing all the different parts of that. So yeah, again, I don't know, show hands if you feel that you'd agree with most of those statements. Yeah, okay. So maximum regulation, minimum resource, the economic squeeze is the ideal breeding ground for these baddies to come after us and attack us and take us down. So this one is really interesting. Again, I'm making it a bit personal, but I find this really interesting, and I kind of bring this up with everybody. And I think this is because what we're seeing, especially from a Rubrik perspective, in our capability, it's really smudging. The word smudging I use a lot, right? Because how I see it is backup sits in IT and infrastructure teams are fundamentally responsible for the backup. But you have security and CISO who have all the security tooling that's looking for the threats and proactively trying to find the problems. We have cyber ops teams and sysops teams that in the unfortunate event of a cyber incident would be responsible for bringing your organization back. So then that starts to kind of make the landscape really, really complex. And again, my engagements with you as companies and as customers is it makes it even more harder, right? Because I'm sort of looking at everybody's different requirements, everyone's different needs for what a technology would be able to deliver. So I think one of the things, if I could impart on this group, I think as organizations we should be doing more of, is pulling in the various parts of our teams to have these conversations about the end-to-end recovery of these services and who does what. Because the other thing that I've found really fascinating, this was actually in a bank recently, when we walked through a full end-to-end recovery as a process, there was a lot of that team do that. This happened in identity more specifically. So Entra teams going, that sits with AD. AD teams going, that sits with Entra. Them saying like, that would be the cyber ops team. And genuinely in this room, it kind of got a little uncomfortable. Because when the question was asked, so when we get hit and we need to recover identities first to bring the people back, then we need to start concentrating on the data. We couldn't even get past step one. because nobody was really, really sure who was ultimately responsible for what. And again, I love all this. I'm really passionate about like the learnings we take from it. And I think potentially like how immature some organizations are. We have it documented, but have we tested it? Do we know it for real? So architectural shifts, dissolving perimeter, lots of vendor wording there. But identity, as I just touched on it, is becoming a really hot topic for Rubrik. Lots of organizations have engaged with us on this. It doesn't mean that you haven't been protecting identity up until now, but how companies have been protecting their identities is in a bit of a traditional format. Usually software sat on hardware, AD would be protected by something different, and Entra, fundamentally, a lot of people are relying on Microsoft. And then if you think about the shared responsibility model, Microsoft are responsible for bringing back your platform. They're not responsible for bringing back your data. And when you start to talk about that, and you start to break down all those complexities, again, think about a cyber incident. We haven't even got past part one. We haven't brought anyone back yet. We haven't brought back anybody that's critical for running our organization. So yeah, identity, really hot area, really kind of an interesting landscape, and really leans into that zero trust architecture that Rubrik fundamentally was built on. So zero trust architecture, it's things like MFA, invisible on the network. We call it a bunker in a box, a hardened appliance. It's where we've converged software and hardware. It's really the fundamentals of making sure that your data is secure. Cloud complexity and misconfiguration. Whew, I mean, this one for me is another ball game, because we meet with all the different parts of an organization, right? Because we classify them as workloads. We have identity, we have M365, we have Salesforce, we have the cloud platform teams. And cloud, and in fairness, a lot of the cloud providers, hyperscalers, are really responding to the change that's happening, and they are making their platforms more robust. However, there's a lot of complexity if you're a multi-cloud organization where policy setups is all done differently. If cloud platform teams have different backup policies and configs and how they're doing that. And then if you start to think about the different services and how you're going to recover all that, yeah, your mind starts to explode. So again, how I always look at this is we call it the 3 C's to keep it really simple. It's complexity, there's cost, and then there's cyber. And when we think about cloud specifically, that's how we look at it. And I always think of a 3-legged stool, because a lot of customers come to us and go, you can save us some money, TCO, you can reduce our cost. Yes, we can. Absolutely, we can. 20% of backup cost is on cloud, and Rubrik have business cases where we save customers up to 30%. Strong message. Without one of the other 2 legs of the stool will break. So unless you're really focusing on cyber, or you're focused on complexity, you kind of need the full story, right? So yes, we can lead with one of those 3, but I would always strongly suggest we look at all 3 in completion. And then finally, IT and OT. So I'm not going to stand here and speak in this this kind of conference on that in any great detail, because it's out of my wheelhouse, right? OT for me is an area that I'm not particularly au fait with. But what I have spoken to recently was a couple of pharmaceutical companies and a couple of energy companies who said that a lot of their critical data was out there in the field on devices like wind farms, masts, and the backing up of that data, really critical data, still using things like USBs, or an engineer was locally having to go out there and back up that data. And again, if anyone has an interest in that specific space, come find Danny and I afterwards, and I will definitely get you in front of the right people. We do have a very strong story there, but I'm certainly not going to try and preach to this group that I know everything in that space, okay? I think we've covered that. The ladies just flagged me 10 minutes. So is your platform a target? I think this is probably one of the most interesting areas where we start to get more into the technical reasons why the scatter spider, the type of attack that we're seeing, is fundamentally causing people a headache for how we've protected historically. So remember, a lot of people were thinking DR. So if you think about things like NAS environments, it was like snap and replicate. We just need another copy of our data. That's what security means. It just means that we have another set of it somewhere and we can bring that back. But fundamentally, if we think about how these attackers are now getting into our organizations, they're attacking the software, all the hardware, they're attacking on different areas and different vectors, different parts of the platform. They're dwelling there. I mean, I was in a boardroom with some way more informed people than myself, in with the C-suite. We got asked to come in because they needed to get investment. They needed to convince their CEO and COO that they needed to do something. And when we sat down, our field CISO explained that, so we walked them through an identity, a day in the life of an identity breach, and what everybody in that room would be expected to do during that day. And I've never felt a room warm up so fast, because the CEO was sort of like, we've got MFA, we're covered, right? And he's looking at the CISO and the CIO. And the CIO and CISO, by the way, sponsored the event, because we were nervous. We were like, we don't want to put these guys under the spotlight. But they actually wanted us in the room. And the CEO kept looking at them both and kept asking them questions, and was just like, we're covered, right? We've got this and we've got that. And the CIO and the CISO were like, yeah, we do. But in this scenario, we wouldn't be protected. We wouldn't be safe. We wouldn't be able to recover. And we wouldn't be able to recover in a timely enough way that would protect our organization. By the time we recover, we've probably lost millions, hundreds of millions. Financial services, billions. CEO starts to lean in. Okay, now this is getting interesting. I thought we were safe. I thought we were protected. Fundamentally, fast forward to the end of the story, I'm now very hot under the collar because everyone's looking a little bit uncomfortable. But he stands up and he says, really appreciate it. And if your job today was to come here to make me nervous, it's worked. It's worked. And that team actually thanked us afterwards. The CIO and the CISO thanked us because they were like, job done. Because they've not believed us. Because our job obviously is to keep the organization safe, and it is our job to kind of bring in these technologies and peoples and processes. But sometimes they need to hear it from somebody else, kind of how other organizations are feeling that and seeing that, and to make it real for them. So again, it's another interesting one. If anybody wants to come and talk to us, one of the things, I think one of my other whys for Rubrik, yes, we're a technology company. Yes, we sell technology. But a lot of what we do is really thought leadership, bringing our stories from other customers, connecting our customers and potential customers together to kind of talk through these problem statements and to try and find real solutions. I can talk a lot and I can't click fast enough. I can't keep up with myself. So yeah, we covered off the architecture. If anybody wants to come and have a chat, by the way, with Danny and I, potentially maybe on like the Zero Trust architecture, you can come and find us, and I think some of you maybe be speaking to today. But yeah, then the why Rubrik. I think I've covered a lot of them throughout this conversation, really around our actual, around our architecture. Actually, this is a really interesting one. I talked about the smudging at the beginning, didn't I? Like how we're smudging into the security space. What does that actually mean? So Rubrik have cyber capabilities from within the software. Great. What does that mean? So now you've all chosen to use Rubrik. You are backing up your most critical, important data with Rubrik, and we've got you, and it's safe. But remember when I said to you about you're using all the scanning and all the capabilities in production to see the threats? So when I spoke to a customer recently, it was really leaning into this. We need to be able to recover. Like we need to test. We need to show and demonstrate that we can recover. And I actually sat with this team and asked them to show me how they would do this in reality. And the team were really quiet and said nothing. I said, guys, well, how would you do this today? And they said, no, this is why we've got you here. We need something to be able to do this and to do this quicker. What did that mean? That meant that if they were hit tomorrow, they would have to take their copy of data into a clean room and go through this really long, horrible process of recovering and identifying clean, which means that they could keep reinfecting themselves. I think, unfortunately, a number of the companies that we've heard about in the press have had that scenario. Kept trying to bring it back. Oh, we've reinfected ourselves. We have to go back to the beginning. With Rubrik, we have threat hunting and anomaly detection and threat monitoring on your backup, using things like Mandiant, searching for and identifying threats within your backup. Then we can actually help identify it, isolate it, quarantine it, so your teams who are fundamentally responsible for recovering can identify clean far faster. And a metric I had from a bank recently, Rubrik, by using us for backup, took their RTO from 8 weeks to 8 days. By leveraging the cyber capability, that came down to 4 days. Our next challenge is to actually do it and work with them to actually do that recovery and bring them services back. But it does have a fundamental impact on your RTOs and RPOs. And the most important thing for me is it actually instills the confidence within your business to be able to recover. It's far less tangible. You can't measure confidence. But if you have your organization feeling more confident that you can recover back in 4 days, then you sort of get the buy-in that you have from your execs. So I guess I kind of asked everybody that question at the beginning, if you're ready for it. I feel like I'm rattling through now, but I've got my timer up. We're here today. I think come find Danny and I. This is up on the screen. There's an awful lot here, but I think this goes back to my smudging story. A lot of people go, Rubrik Security, you're a backup company. We are way more than that. When I showed a group of architects recently this slide, their eyes were all over the screen and they were like, oh my goodness, like we're gonna have to bring this person in and this person in and this person in. But I was like, that's fantastic. Let's get everybody in the room. Let's get everybody talking like how we can do this. And this is also really important. The integrations, your investments that you've already got, how can we help you light them up? How can we make you get more value out of those investments that you've already made? And vice versa. So again, something I think we're really passionate about is how do we fit into your security and your infrastructure landscapes? Finally, our customers. So this is not exhaustive. Obviously, clearly, these are the ones that are publicly open to sharing their stories. But this is, I mean, again, since I started at Rubrik and my journey at the beginning, I said to you, like, my why. When I go and speak to customers, or if I pick up the phone to try and speak to somebody, what I love now is I get a pull and it's not a push. I tend to not have to try very hard to try and meet people to just have a conversation about what they're trying to achieve. So I kind of take that as a kudos of what we're doing is the right thing in the market. And I think the onboarding, I think it's like, was it, Danny, like 62% growth this year we've seen year on year. So yeah, we're doing something right. I'd love to ask if anyone's got any questions. And I hope you have found that informative today. And I hope some of those messages that I've delivered have landed. But yeah, anyone got any questions? I've got 1 minute. Oh, must have been a comprehensive delivery. No questions.
A few things for me.
Yeah.
And I think what's really important about resilience, you come from a government environment, I come from a government environment, and we exercise a lot, and so we are well prepared. And so what happens at 10 o'clock every Tuesday in your businesses? Or maybe 10 o'clock on a Friday, or fire alarm goes off, right? And we all ignore it, and we all think that. And twice a year, maybe we all go and stand outside for 10 minutes, because we practice a fire alarm in the event of a disaster or a business impacting event. How many times do we actually notionally practice and then pull the plug in the cyber alarm goes off? We don't. So I think it's really important, what you're saying, is that resiliency. Is you can have BIAs and you can have DRs and backups, but for goodness sake, we all know, and we're preaching to the converted, as Vicky said at the start, it's quite daunting trying to talk to an audience all nodding, going, yeah, we know. But actually, convince your board of the analogy of the fire alarm. We do that every week. Most people begin to ignore that, I get, but actually when we all have to stand up and stand outside in November for 2 minutes at the travel lodge next door or wherever your office is, we do it. So I would suggest that the argument is why don't we test probably something that's more business impacting than an office burning down, because we can all work from home now thanks to COVID. But actually, if the data and the operations stop. So go in with the fire alarm analogy, I would suggest, as another tactic to say, let's pull the plug, let's invest a day in pulling the plug. Quite literally, we've done that, and you might be able to have your backups fine, but restoring, somehow the bandwidth narrows when you want to restore stuff, doesn't it? It takes weeks, right? Well, we back up every week, we back up every day, but actually restoring that is really important. And if you test and exercise your resilience plans, you realise that probably 70% of the data you never ever need in the first place, so why are you even backing it up? Right? So there's lots of efficiencies to be made in actually testing these plans.
And it's the muscle memory.
Yeah.
Because one of the technology resilience guys I spoke to recently said it's really difficult within our organisation to get that muscle memory, because we're not getting hit every day, thankfully. But like, how do those people, it's also just, we always talk about not just the technology, it's the people and the processes that underpin that and testing that. So yeah,
and
thank you for that.
We all talk about stress, panic, nervous, oh my gosh, knackered. Well, actually, why not feel prepared? That's okay, because it happens. Pretty comfortable. We're prepared for this. So actually, change that rhetoric and talk about being prepared for the disaster and the response. The recovery and your detection and recovery will hopefully take its own course, but the response is, no, it's fine. Sitting around the board saying, it's okay, because we've been through this. So, yeah.
Thank you for that. Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate the time today. Hope to speak to you later.